Hello and warm welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we'll be discussing a public survey produced by King's College London that reflects on British attitudes towards God in comparison with over 120 different other countries, in which they state that our country, Great Britain, is one of the most ungodliest nations in the entire planet. So we'll be discussing this survey. And in this programme today, I will be joined by Rebekah Moffett, who has a new position at the London School of Theology, together with Helen Spiby-Vann from the Christian People's Alliance. So welcome to the programme. And good to have you back on the programme, Rebekah. You're going through an interesting time. Not only have you changed jobs,
yep.
And a big loss for Christian Concern, can I say that? You're also moving home and also getting married as well in July, so congratulations.
Thank you
I'm very
very
happy
much.
for you.
Decided to do all the change in one go.
It's the best way to do it, isn't it? Get it over and done with.
Apparently so.
Definitely. So share with us a little bit more about your new role with the London School of Theology, because I know that you did a superb job at Christian Concern, and I'm pretty sure that you'll do a great job at the London School of Theology as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me on as well. It's great to be back. Yes, so I started at the London School of Theology about a month ago now, so still very new to the role, but I am the new Marketing and Communications Manager there, which basically means I get to market London School of Theology, or LST as it's become known, to the wider world, which is great. So we take on students from a variety of backgrounds, normally Christian, students from all different ages and stages and all different countries as well, and we basically give them a theological grounding so that they can go into their chosen vocation. So we don't just focus on theology, we also offer programs on theology and counselling, theology and music. We've got various music programs, we've got worship studies, creative musicianship, and we also offer postgraduate courses and research courses as well, so you could do a PhD with us if you so decided and wanted to delve even deeper into theology and what it means for life, really.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this excellent promo produced by the London School of Theology.
Since its founding in 1943, London School of Theology has been dedicated to serving the church worldwide, educating a wide variety of students of different backgrounds, ages and stages in life. For almost 80 years, we have been designing programs to give you a biblical and theological foundation on which to build your life, rooted in Christ, centered in the kingdom of God. Many of our students have gone on to have a significant impact in various contexts around the world, including through mission, worship ministry, counseling and psychotherapy, church leadership, teaching, charity work, and of course academia as well. Yet at LST, we're also focused on building up a community of Christians who are grounded in the gospel, the good news, but are prepared to step out into the world and live for Jesus Christ. That is why we focus on a wide variety of vocations, all of which are rooted in theology. So whether you're interested in studying theology in counselling, or one of our theology, music and worship programs, or simply delving deeper into study with one of our postgraduate degrees, especially our research degrees, you can be sure that our thought-provoking and challenging programs will enable you to connect your faith with your passion for God's world. So whether you're leaving sixth form and thinking about university, or wanting to continue your academic research and development, or simply wanting to grow in your ministry experience, we have a program that could work for you. All of our programs are quality assured and validated by Middlesex University. So whether you want to study for a certificate, a diploma or a degree, or perhaps a master's degree or even a PhD, we offer a flexible learning program, and several of our programs are taught online as well as in the classroom, enabling you to engage in your study in a way that suits you. I'm delighted to say that applications for all of our courses are now open. So whether you want to deepen your musical abilities, learn more about counselling and delve deeper into scripture and theology, connecting with a Christian community in a beautiful part of London, then apply now. If you want to find out more, please go to lst.ac.uk. We look forward to hearing from you.
So if you're interested in theology, get in touch with Rebekah. She'll be your first point of call. And Helen, I can't welcome back. You did a great job the last time you were on the programme. So if you give us an update on the work of the Christian People's Alliance, particularly as we've had a local election take place since you were last on the programme.
Yes, we've had some candidates standing around the country in local elections, and for example our candidate standing in Peterborough did a good job. We were up there canvassing, and at the doorstep we know that people are very supportive of our values. We talk about we're the party that helps poor people, we tackle the root causes of poverty, we promote family values, marriage, support couples, and all kinds of things that promote flourishing of life. And definitely the response from the doorstep is very positive. Lots of people support our values, although we don't necessarily see that reflected in the votes. And I think that's because a lot of Christians are quite discouraged by the process and they're not actually going out there and voting. People that aren't Christians are still a little bit maybe suspicious, even though they support our values. They think because perhaps we don't have candidates all over the country, maybe their vote will be wasted. But all these inroads are really important. And at the doorstep, it's amazing. Sometimes you really have a wonderful conversation with somebody. You can just mention a special God-given value like marriage and how important it is and how hard it is as a grown-up sort of parent of grown-up children to support the children in marriage. And one lady at the doorstep, something, I don't know what it was exactly I said, but she was very touched, and she actually started to tell me all kinds of things about like how she was supporting family. And I just said, you know, this is what we're here for. We're a political party, we're promoting God's values, we think they're best for the whole country, but at the end of the day, it's also like a ministry. And we are ministering to people all over the place. One of our candidates got a very good vote. Number is 8%, which is quite unusual. He'd been standing for many years, and it just goes to show that it is worth persevering. Even though we don't see breakthrough results, you know, coming very rapidly one after the other, what we do see is growth. So just encourage people to stand. We've got an election coming up, another election, because there's a councillor in my area in Haringey who's unfortunately passed away, and we're looking for somebody who would be prepared to stand in Haringey for Hermitage and Gardens. It's a ward that's not far from where I live. It's a lovely ward, and I've already started to outreach to some of the Christians that I know in that area. So please pray for us.
Very good, very good. And it's important you engage in the political issues and stand on biblical principles. So well done, Helen. Rebekah, what are your thoughts on the topic of today's discussion, which is a survey produced by King's College London, covered by Christianity Today, that has effectively concluded that the British people that were surveyed are the least religious in the world. So what does this mean for Christian freedoms in this country, and your thoughts on this survey?
I thought it was very interesting, actually. Somewhat unsurprising, perhaps. I think during the past 4 decades, even beyond, we've seen that trend in our nation of becoming less Christian, or at least rejecting Christian principles. I think quite often we want to keep the Christian morals and traditions, or values even, you know, diversity and tolerance and all of these things that are originally in their right place, Christian values. We want them, but we want them without God. And I think we've seen that trend happening for at least the last 40 years, if not longer. I'd argue possibly since the Second World War, really. So it's somewhat unsurprising. The part that did surprise me was that younger people, or the younger generations, are more likely to believe in the concept of heaven and hell, but less likely to believe in God. So there's definitely puzzling...
There's a contradiction there.
It is, yeah. There are puzzling pieces there. But yeah, sadly unsurprising. I think it really underlines the need for real theological basis to be taught in our churches, in our schools, in our universities, for that to be at the forefront, because I think that does risk Christian freedoms, actually. If we're not teaching the truth, if we're not really rooted in biblical foundations, then what will our nation become?
Absolutely. And Helen, with your work of being very active with the Christian People's Alliance and being on the doorstep, what have you encountered in terms of the results reflected in this survey conducted by King's College London on British attitudes towards faith and British attitudes towards God?
Yes, I think the first thing I would say is the use of the word religious in the survey. It's very open-ended and it assumes that everybody knows what religious means. And what I'm finding is that actually everybody has got a different opinion of view, of whether it's philosophy or an ideology. So there isn't really such a thing as somebody that's not religious in a way, depending on how you view it. But certainly when I'm out on the streets discussing people, I see all these different groups. Just recently I met a neighbour. She's what would be described as pre-war, so she's an elderly lady. And I was asking her about the results of the survey. I said, your generation is, it sort of started off being quite religious, believing in God, and now it seems to have moved away. I said, is that what you would consider yourself to be? Because I was actually thinking that she's not a believer. She doesn't go to church. But then she said to me, she really surprised me, and she had a very serious look on her face, and she said, the first thing she said was, there's so many religions now that it's somehow that it affected her faith, the fact there were so many religions in the country. Now, that I didn't know quite what to think of that, but then she said to me, I don't go to church, but I believe in God and I pray to God every night. Now, I think she might be quite atypical because a lot of the pre-war generation hadn't necessarily been through they'd been through difficulties and they knew what was right and what was wrong, but they didn't necessarily pass those values on to their children, who would possibly be the boomers. Now, she has been through quite a lot of difficulties, and I think that's helped her to understand how vulnerable she is. She also mentioned a friend of hers who's much younger. She's a millennial, and she does exactly the same. She prays every night but doesn't go to church. There's so many different people that I meet, but every single person has some kind of faith, so I'm not quite sure, who it is that's not believing anything. People are always believing something. A wonderful experience I had once with a lady. She was a millennial, and she got on a bus with a dog. We got talking. Before I knew it, she said, well, I respect your views, but actually I don't like God and I know I'm going to go to hell. And I was just quite shocked. I said, well, don't say that. You can't say that. That's not true. I discussed about faith and receiving Jesus. And then I said, look, would you be okay with me doing a test on you to see how anti-God you really are? So she said, okay, and she was quite curious. So I said, okay, first of all, listen to the questions and then answer yes or no. So I said, first of all, do you agree with these statements or not? Do you believe that it's wrong to tell lies? She said, yeah. Do you believe it's wrong to steal? She said, yeah. I said, do you believe that it's wrong to commit adultery? She said, yes, definitely. She said, I know that for sure. My partner's just left. And I was thinking, gosh, this is really serious stuff. I was actually quite shocked. When once you dip into the Ten Commandments, you're really part of the spiritual battle on the coalface of it. And then I asked her, what about, not killing? She said, yeah, absolutely. And she was even incredibly pro-life. So we went through these various questions. And I said, at the end of it, I said, well, do you want the good news or the bad news? I said, do you know what? You are definitely not anti-God. I said, all these values, you are totally on the same page as God. And she was she was shocked and stunned. And she was so happy. She was so happy to realise that actually the person that she was thinking God was just a complete bogus idea, and that she could then receive more of the message of God's love because the person that she thought was God wasn't actually the real God.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I think maybe this is the perception that people have of God needs to change. And you raise a very good point there, Helen. And Rebekah, share with us the kind of spiritual danger our nation is in, particularly if this survey reflects the views of the most of the British people, that God has essentially faded away as there's a disbelief in heaven and then a disbelief in hell. What are the spiritual indicators you think coming out of this survey produced by King's College London?
That's a good question. I think Helen's hit the nail on the head. I think this idea of who God is, nobody really knows anymore because it's not taught anywhere really, other than, well, hopefully in our churches, but as we can see there's a decline in church attendance as well. That's not specifically in this survey, but we know that to be true. I think the real danger there is that, as I mentioned before, we take these Christian morals that we have set up there through, our Christian heritage in this nation. We've got the values of family, of marriage, life, diversity even. We take them and we distort them because we reject God. And I think that's the real spiritual danger. And I think we're seeing it in terms of identity and other issues like that. Mental health is a big one too. It's this rejection of God that's skewing our values, to be honest. And therefore we're seeing great change. We're seeing a big drop in numbers for people who really hold on to the truth. So I think the real answer to that is to be teaching good theology, to be quite honest with you. What does it really look like to be a diverse nation? What does it really look like to know what love is? If God is love, what does that look like?
So in other words, our churches need to become more biblically literate. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
And Helen, share with us how comprehensive this study is, because King's College London has produced this through the World Values Survey, a study of the social, political, economic, and religious and cultural values across 120 countries since 1981, and the fact that we come so low on the list in terms of belief in God shows you how far spiritually this nation has come from, particularly when we consider that this nation was at the forefront of spreading the gospel around the world. We had incredible Christian pioneers in this country, to name a few, the likes of William Wilberforce, the likes of William Shaftesbury, Tyndale, who translated the Bible from Latin into English, and countless missionaries like Dr. Livingstone and others. Why do you think that we have fallen so far away from our incredible Christian heritage that this nation once stood for, maybe 100 years ago?
Yes, it is very sad, and I think in terms of being comprehensive, it surveyed 300 people from the different demographics, different age groups, and interestingly, although I wouldn't think 3,000 to start with was a big number, but it does correlate quite well with the results from the census in 2021, such that I think it was something like 50% or something of the religious groups, when you add them together, it's similar to 49% that this World Values Survey comes up with. And what it really does show is that people have turned their backs on God. And when I think about the Generation X, which is what I'm part of, what we were exposed to when we were younger, there's definitely a spiritual dimension, but it's not necessarily a healthy one. So by the time Generation X came along, we kind of we weren't really given, we didn't know exactly what right and wrong was. We were pushing God's boundaries without realising what we were trying to push against. And quite a few of people that I know from Generation X, they had sort of paranormal experiences. One of my friends saw a ghost, and after that she kind of felt she knew there was an afterlife, which is what this survey represents. A lot of people from Generation X and millennials actually believe in an afterlife. And so people were discovering that, but at the same time there was something that was sort of imparted to her in this experience that made it hard for her to believe in God. So she had a belief in the afterlife, but it was without God. Another of my friends, a very close relative, had an out-of-body experience when they were in hospital. This was passed on to her as she was growing up. She went to see a medium, and then basically she believed in an afterlife, but God was far from it. In fact, the strange thing is, having whatever that impartation is through that knowledge, which God, you know, it says in the Bible, don't consult mediums, but there's something that seems to be imparted that paralyzes your faith, and faith in the true faith in God. And it reminds me of in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Edmund, he ended up eating that Turkish delight, and somehow after that he was sort of connected to the darkness then. He was almost paralysed, and I think that really is quite a good picture of the generations that have come up. And without the people who do believe speaking out, there's nobody challenging these wrong ideas. You know, and when once that's sort of infiltrated, like I can say to my friends and point them in and give them the gospel, but it is like they don't want to, they're frightened of it. And that shows the spiritual transaction that's happened. They're not open, they're actually frightened. They will move away from any conversation about God. And it's not because they're fed up or they think I'm, you know, just being pushy or Bible bashing. They literally are frightened of hearing the truth.
Yeah, I think that does not reflected in this survey, this kind of occultic explosion that's occurred over the last few decades, which then does taint people's views of God and what have you. So, of course, the increase of darkness. But I'm just going to give you a few statistics before I answer my next question to you, Rebekah. So, the survey looked at UK residents of 3,056 people across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland was studied for the study by IPOS between March and September 2022. The findings reveal that belief in God has declined dramatically amongst Britons, 3/4 who believed in God in 1981 to just under 49% in 2022. So what impact does this have on government policy? Because governments look at surveys, they look at the census, they see that Christianity and its influence is declining in this country. So, and as our nation becomes kind of more secular in its outlook and its approach, how does that affect kind of anti-Christian legislation that we're seeing? And does that give the government a green light to push through policies that are effectively against freedom of religion in this country?
Well, I think the truth of it is that you've got to look at these statistics more holistically. We are a nation that is becoming more godless, as you say, but also we're becoming a nation that is more obese, suffers more with mental health. There is a correlation there that I think the government actually needs to look at and say, okay, well, what if we change this? Will that affect that? I mean, it could be that maybe there's a correlation, but it doesn't. They're not necessarily affected one or the other. Personally, I think they probably are. You know, when we take God out of the equation, Absolutely. Things fall apart. And we can see that when we put God back into the equation, that's when things start going in the right direction. So I think really the government needs to take note from church leaders, from Christians. I think the CPA is doing a brilliant job there as well. You know, we need to rally behind groups like that. We need to, we really need to speak truth and sort of say, well, actually, if our policies are based on real biblical principles, if we're really putting God at the centre of things, if we really have a true understanding of theological grounding, then actually things are going to go better for us. And I don't say that lightly. I know that maybe sounds a little extreme, or it sounds sort of almost like a pipe dream, but I do honestly believe that you know, if we put God at the centre, then that's where change happens.
And Rebekah, we've mentioned in this programme Helen representing Generation X. I'm also part of Generation X as well. It's a kind of very rebellious generation that wanted to push the liberal extremes much further than our parents, who are the kind of baby boomer generation that wanted to throw off the moral straitjacket of the 1950s, and wanted more to be more liberal and more free, and I think our generation went through a massive excess and wanting to go further and push those boundaries further and further. And then we take, for example, within 2 minutes, your generation, which is the millennial generation, plagued by kind of social anxiety as well. And as obviously that's had a knock-on effect. And so wouldn't you say there is a correlation between this huge mental health crisis within your generation and Generation Z and this departure from godly morals and statutes that the post World War II generation knew and were brought up in?
Yeah, I think there is a great correlation there. I think it's as you say, that push towards, well, anti-God, but also you have the answer within yourself. It's very self or inward looking. It's very insular, to be honest. And I think we have to realise that we don't have the answers. And so particularly for my generation, we've seen that there is massive sort of anxiety around millennials. It's quite often made fun of, but it is true. And I think we're seeing that in Gen Z as well, quite similar, but maybe there's a sort of turning point there, I think. At the London School of Theology, we actually own our own counselling service, REMA, because we recognise that is a danger. So anyone can come to us.
Wonderful. Yeah. Helen and Rebekah, thank you so much for being my guest for this week's edition of Politics Day. You've both done a great job, so thank you. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home as we've unpacked this survey produced by King's College London, reflecting on a survey of British attitudes towards God. What it clearly shows is that we are now living in a godless society as we are facing the after effects of abandoning our Judeo-Christian heritage. So keep praying, and thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.